You're listening to Generation Jones, 1954 to 1964. Conversations with remarkable people who have shaped our world. I'm your host, Wendi Cooper, and I do hope you enjoy the show. Today, my guest is John Tarnoff. I call him the father of reinvention. He is a career coach for people over 50. John is the author of the book, The Boomer Reinvention, How to Create Your Dream Career Over 50. We have similar backgrounds in entertainment. In fact, when I was reading John's book, I felt like he had read my mind. John believes that many people in their 50s and 60s have lost long-standing jobs. Many of us are holding on to the jobs or businesses we have, but feeling challenged, pressured, and unsure about our future. The certainty and smooth sailing that we were promised has not materialized, and we know it's not going to. We find ourselves in a time of unexpected shifts in the economy and the world at large, and we're struggling to find a way forward. His book has all the tools one needs to create their second act and find their purpose. John Tarnoff, welcome to Generation Jones.
It's great to be here. Thanks, Wendi.
Thanks for taking the time. I mean, it is a Saturday morning. Where are you, by the way?
I'm at my Carnegie Mellon office in North Hollywood. So,
you are?
So I co-run this graduate program in entertainment industry management for Carnegie Mellon. Done this for the past 9 or so years. And this was my segue out of DreamWorks Animation, my last entertainment industry job, and where I got focused on education and training, and propelled me into education and training full time. And the Carnegie Mellon is the anchor gig. And then in true second act entrepreneurial fashion, I have my consulting, coaching, speaking practice on top of that. And that's what we're going to talk about today.
That's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to, I think what guests will find out when they're on my show is if they have written a book and it's less than 1,000 pages, I will try to read most of it. And I think that's very helpful to our conversation because I did spend the time, I drive from El Segundo to Burbank every day, and I always have to have something plugged into my ears, right? So I listened to your wonderful book, and it's Reinvention, Boomer Reinvention, right?
How to Create Your Dream Career Over 50.
That's right. And I loved it. I have to tell you, I highly recommend it for anyone that is going through this high anxiety, internal confusion once you're in your late 50s or your early 60s. Like I went through it for a couple of years, and I didn't really realize what it was until I actually listened to your book, John. I have to be honest with you. You put it in such a way that I started to go, wait a minute. That's exactly what I've been experiencing for the past few years. And I thought it was just me full of anxiety about where I was in life. I didn't realize that it is so widespread.
It is. And it's interesting. It's kind of a second midlife crisis that hits us. And the first midlife crisis in our 40s has been really well documented, and it's one sense of identity. But I think what happens in our culture and our economy when you hit 50 is that you realize that the deck begins to stack against you, and the expectations that we grew up with, boomers, Gen X, Generation Jones.
We'll talk.
All of us.
Yeah, we'll talk a little bit about that.
That expectation was that we were going to get a good education that would entitle us to a 30, 40-year career, and then we would get to retire. And that was the assumption. And I think the reason I got into this is because I realized that in the wake of the 2008 recession, people were all of a sudden, it's a wake-up call. People were underwater on their mortgages. They'd lost half the value of their nest egg, their retirement savings. And I thought, well, what are we going to do? We can't afford to retire. And
we don't want to retire. We don't want to retire.
but we certainly can't afford it. And where are the jobs? Where is the economic, commercial, corporate culture that says, yeah, we need the value of the experience and the strategic insight that you bring as an older worker? It's like, no, first to go, right? First to get cut, first to get downsized. And so when you get into your 50s, if you're working in corporate America, you're going to start realizing that the looks you're getting as you walk down the hall are different. And there is this increasing pressure on you to get the F out because that's the way it's supposed to be.
We were taught, and I was not, taught that we go to school, we get a degree, we find our job, we retire with a nice 401k plan or whatever it might be. For me, it was completely not like that at all. It was get in your Volkswagen, go do what you want to do. My parents were pretty affluent in the Valley. And, hey, you'll figure out life. And so I was like the Beverly Hillbillies, and a lot of my friends became very successful. A lot of Jonesers are of that age where they didn't go to college, right? Steve Jobs, when you think about it, Bill Gates.
Where I'm going with this more than defining this from a generational point of view is really looking at the world that we live in today. And where I'm going to more and more is that this is an over 50 phenomenon.
That's right.
Regardless of what generation you belong to. Because what I'm talking about now applies to Gen Xers as much as it applies to Gen Jonesers or Boomers or whoever we think we are.
Yeah.
And all of those cultural experiences and norms that we grew up with are great and bind us in a certain way. Now we are facing the fact that whatever the distinction, whether you grew up in a family that sent you to college or one that basically said do your own thing or whatever that is, you're now facing this present economic reality.
That's right. And that's what I'm finding so interesting. So I set off on a path. My path is taking some twists and turns, and I'm learning more and more. And I learned so much from your book that I am one of many, that this is extremely ubiquitous, and that anybody that is listening and going through it. And I have to say, my very first guest was Saul Colt. He's 47, I believe, and he told a story about how he was told, he's a marketer, he was told that he would have to either dye his beard or shave it off before he went in for the job interview.
Right. Well, I get really angry about shit like that.
Yeah.
And I talk about this in the book, and I really lead with this to a great extent. And so I'll just kind of digress for a sec. There's because you were there. So that event that I spoke at for the Society of Medical TV Engineers. So this was an interesting event for your listeners. This was a multi-generational, multi-diversity-based evening to talk to people from various cohorts about opportunities. This was for the entertainment business, but I think it really applied more broadly to, how do you get a job and how do you develop a career from the point of view of being in some diverse group, whether it's African Americans or women or older people, or one guy talked about the challenge of people with mental development issues. People on the spectrum.
We were at an event and they were talking about inclusion and diversity, right? Wasn't that the.
So there was a guy who was at that event who I met at that event, and he sent me a note afterwards and he said, really liked what you had to say, and, let's connect on LinkedIn and blah, blah, blah. And that was that. And then about, I guess, a month or so later, he sent me this note and he said this. He said, I followed your advice, and the two things that I did have landed me a job. And one of the things that I did was I started to be proud of my age. And I stopped avoiding talking about my age. I put my age back on my resume and my graduation years. And the other thing that I did was, you said, if you don't have anything going on, volunteer. Go work just to kind of, get out there and meet people and feel good about yourself because you're making someone else's life better. So I went out and I volunteered. And what happened was he met a woman at this event, started talking, and she said, shoot me your resume. And he said, yeah, sure, fine, why not? And he sent his resume to him thinking, what the hell, I do this all the time, nothing ever happens. Well, she sent the resume to a young CEO of a company in his business. And this guy happened to be looking for someone with experience. So the fact that he had his age on his resume was a plus in this particular case. They called the guy in, 2 meetings, and about 10 days later, he had his dream job. And he attributed it to those 2 ideas that I came up with for him in that lecture.
Yeah,
so,
I think embracing your age.
This is back to your question about the guy who dyed his beard or was forced to dye his beard. I mean, we need to start pushing back against this ridiculousness.
Right.
And I'm all at the forefront of that, along with a bunch of other people.
Right. And well, I hope I've just joined you, because I think that I actually rewrote the landing page of my, I think you're going to like this, of my website yesterday, because John has this thing in his book. He not only explains very well what it's like to be going through this time in your life in the first part of the book, but then you go through case studies, which are super interesting, most of them quite the opposite of mine. That's why I sent you my story. And then he gives you the tools. You give the steps, and we'll talk about those steps. But one of them is journaling. And I've talked about it before, where people have suggested journaling on my show. And I always say it is my biggest resistance thing. I cannot. And I make a joke, John. I say, right. I don't want to leave a journal behind, right? I don't want people finding it after I'm gone. But there's a 32-day challenge in the book and the tools and on your website. And I started the journaling part of it. I got a calendar on my desk at work, and I marked the date. And then I carry my little Technicolor notebook around with me so I can journal. Right. And it was day 2. I was journaling, and it inspired me. It gave me, all of a sudden, my fingers just started tapping away. And I finally found what I wanted to say and what my passion was, and how I wanted to embrace my age and my wisdom and other people's wisdom. And, that's really, but it opened that floodgate. It was so amazing.
That's so great to hear. And that's a wonderful reminder to people about how this process works, because it is hard to get started. And I get a lot of resistance from people who say, oh, I haven't journaled since I was a teenager. And it's like, well, that's possibly an explanation for why you're stuck, because there's no connection to your flow. And by doing this every day, and I advocate this, is make it easy on yourself. It's 20 minutes a day. Do it first thing in the morning, last thing at night, undisturbed, quiet time for you to really contemplate what's going on in your head and just write it down. And you were saying, I don't want to leave a journal. It's like, no, burn the pages if you want, right? You don't have to read it. You don't have to keep it. It's not about writing something that you're going to look at or preserve or edit. This is a vehicle to get your thoughts out of your head and to really tap into your unconscious and honor the idea that I talk about in the book, which is that the career you want is already inside you. It's not about the classic career coach process of doing what HR wants us to do, which is to fit into a box that they have decided or think they've decided is appropriate for their agenda, not for your agenda. Yeah. So it's time for us to kind of decouple from this system that we've been kowtowing to all this time and really contribute based on who we are, what we love to do, what we know we can do at this point in our lives, and where we can be useful. That's the most important part. Now, just one more aspect of the rant here, and I'll stop. Remember this idea of follow your bliss? Mm-hmm. So we kind of all, right? And we all grew up. I mean, even whether you're boomers or Jen Jones or whatever, we grew up.
No, we all grew up with follow your bliss.
idolizing Joseph Campbell and this idea of follow your bliss and the money will come. Well, I'm not so sure about that. I think that if follow your bliss were a strategy for success, then every contestant on American Idol would be a superstar, right? Would be a zillionaire.
Right.
It doesn't work that way.
Right.
But this idea of usefulness, I think, is the key, because now, particularly, we've been around a while. We're kind of road tested. We've tried and failed and tried and failed and tried and succeeded. We know where we can kick ass. So be useful and figure out where that combination of experiences and skills and talents and preferences can be useful, and lead with that.
Especially today, well, for the past few years, actually. I suppose for people that have spent most of their lives in a corporate environment, that it's maybe a little uncomfortable. I did the opposite, right? But
Right.
You have to.
You're a serial reinventor.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
But I also have a lot of challenges in certain networking things. But for people who are coming out of the corporate world, and you're saying, take your wisdom, take what you have, know what you know, and then leverage that. And I 1000% agree with you. But it's scary. It's scary to think of, how do I get started? What happens if I fail? How long is it going to take? Am I really capable of doing that? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, I think that's actually why the journal is so important. I've used this technique repeatedly, as you know, and I mean, just for your listeners, I dine out on the fact that I've been fired 39% of the time in my career, and I kind of did that calculation when I did my TEDx talk back in 2012 about this, and I'm trying to figure out, so what qualifies me to talk about reinventing your career? And it's the fact that I've had to do it repeatedly. And people say, oh, so does it get easier? It's like, no, it doesn't get easier to be fired from a job and have to pick yourself up off the floor and build yourself back up. But you can put a system to it. And the journal, for me, is a great way of processing that dark night of the soul that seems to go on for weeks or months. And if you're an older person between jobs, it will take you about 30 to 50% longer to find a job than someone younger, someone under 50. So that's part of the ageist economy that we're dealing with.
Yeah.
But processing through the journal is my advice for how you get started. And there were plenty of mornings on a number of occasions, and even most recently, when in 2009, 2010, I left DreamWorks Animation, and that was a great gig, and I really loved the company and did some great stuff there. And we kind of had a parting of the ways. It was very unusual. I didn't really get fired in a classic sense. It was like I kind of ran out of ramp, and I went to them at one point. I said, "So, am I done here?" And they went, "Yeah, I guess." It's like, we love you. You've done great work here, but we don't think there's much left for you to do. And I thought, okay, well, I gotta kind of leave and figure this out. So it was really weird, but I had this idea of what I wanted to do, but I had no traction. And there were days when I woke up in a complete sweat and a complete panic.
Yeah.
And I got that journal out from beside my bed and I started writing. And by the time I was 20, 30 minutes into it, I had a clearer sense of what I was going to do that day to take the next step towards what has eventually become this practice.
Yeah, I have to say, for the past couple of years, I was waking up extremely, not I wouldn't say anxious, but like my first thought was, I have 7 years to 70. And I literally was always my first thought in the morning. And recently, since I kind of found this little side passion I do on Saturdays, I don't have that anymore. And the more I speak with my friends that are my age, a few years younger, and the more that I have people on the show, and the more I read and I speak to you and people like you, I'm realizing every conversation that I have, John, with my friends, whether they're hosts that have been on television and now are aging out of hosting, right? Or whether they're artists that I have known for a very long time and and they think they're aging out of being an artist, which is weird, but they're all seeking the same thing. They're all seeking what you mentioned as, I think someone else called it, their encore performance in life.
I think what we're seeing in our culture is this strange phenomenon that we are too old to be young and too young to be old. There is this new phase of life, this encore phase, second act phase, that is the result of longevity and perhaps better healthcare for some of us. And the idea that if you turn, this is actuarial, if you turn 65 today, you've got a 20% chance, 25% chance of living to 90, living past 90. So, and every year that you age past 65 improves your chances of living past 90. So I'm 66 today. So does that mean I have 24 years, maybe 20, 30 years left? And, you were saying about how you...
Don't say it, John. Don't say it.
No, you were saying before about how you kind of like have no idea about how you're going to, have enough money to live to 90. And I was saying, well, this is a limiting belief. You kind of, you gotta face
Change
this
minds, yes.
and reframe this idea that you'll never be able to save enough money. But that's a big problem for a lot of people. A lot of people underestimate the amount of money that they're going to need to live past the traditional retirement age. And people who think they've got a secure pension, I would encourage them to review that belief in their pension and the financial stability of the company that is funding their pension, because I think things are going to change over the next 10 years. You're going to see lots of economic hardship in our generation, and people over 50, people over 60, people over 70. This is a tremendous age bubble that we are dealing with. 10,000 people turning 65 every day between now and the end of 2029. Something like 20. I keep forgetting this statistic, but 20% of the population is going to be over 65 or something within 5 years. I mean, this is a serious issue. So we have to keep working for our benefit and for the benefit of the economy. And we have to make sure that we're going to put enough money away every day so that we can work as long as we can, because we're going to need it when we are no longer able to work, 20 years from now.
So you just mentioned reframing, and you talk about this in the book. And you say form, follow thought. I made that note here, that intention is a reality. And so my question would be, how do we reframe after a life of living in basically one frame, career, relationship, whatever it might be? How do we go about reframing?
Well, reframing starts when you hear yourself say something that is limiting and probably outdated, such as, oh, that's not who I am. Oh, I don't work that way. Oh, I can't do that. Anything that you assume that carries a negative connotation to it, reframing is the opportunity to say, well, how could I rethink that in a positive way? I'm terrible at networking. I hear this a lot. I just hate networking. Well, first of all, I would say, what is it about networking that you don't like? Oh, I can't sell myself. I'm a terrible salesperson. Okay. Well, if you're doing something or proposing something that you really feel committed to, that you love doing, that you've really thought about in depth and you can really get behind, and you've got a great pitch around it and a great vision for what that is that you do or want to do, then why do you think you have to sell it? Why not just be enthusiastic about it? Just really embrace all of the wonderful aspects of this vision that you have and look for opportunities to share it with people, because you're just so darn excited about it. And that's what networking looks like. Yeah. So why are you afraid of networking when all that's about is finding people who agree with you and support your agenda?
I have to say that most people who see me, and you do talk about this also in the book, I think about yourself, is when you had the epiphany that, wait a minute, maybe I got fired 73% of the time from my jobs or whatever, but you were talking to someone and they were going on and on and on about how they admired your career and everything that you've done. And that is exactly me talking to somebody. Oh, Wendi, you've done this and you've done this and you've done this and you've done that. But that never meant that I was fulfilled nor really successful in how I was looking at myself.
Well, exactly, because your benchmarks were not your own benchmarks. You were benchmarking to someone else's idea about who you should be or what you should do, right? As opposed to looking more deeply inside yourself and going, this is the way I roll, right? So how do I make the most of the way that I'm wired?
Well,
and that really goes to the challenge for all of us here at this stage, where people are not saying, oh, come over here. You're young and impressionable and cheap. Come over here and work for me and I'll teach you whatever. Now it's like, oh, they know stuff already. I don't know, what can you do for me? You don't want to be in a position to say, I'll do anything. Just, I've got experience. I can do this. I can do this. I can do this. Nobody wants to hear that. People want you to tell them what the solution is that you provide to their problem.
Right. Problem solution, even when it comes to humanity in anything. I mean, I come from branding and marketing in television, and that's all it is how are you going to make them the hero? So if the wisdom that I have and I've gained on my journey through life will make you look like a hero, that's all that really matters at the end of the day.
I think the biggest challenge for us, people who are coming out of jobs, for many years and working under the direction of a supervisor, is this challenge of, well, what is it that I provide? What is it that I solve? And I would suggest to everyone that there is something that you can do that is uniquely you. It doesn't have to be unique in the world, but it is uniquely you. It is a synthesis of all of your past experiences and your skills and your preferences, your relationships, all of that stuff. Start writing this stuff down. Use the journal, use other forms of expression to do this. Talk to people about it. Build a sense of who you are, how you're perceived. Where you can be, again, most useful. There is tremendous opportunity out there as the economy gets crazier and crazier. People need us. They need this experience. Just like the guy who I met at the SIMTI event, who found someone who wanted an older person with experience to solve his problem. And there he goes, off in his ideal job. So I think that, it's not easy for everyone to figure this out, but the hardest part of it for you, Mr. or Ms. Listener, is drilling down on the value that you provide, the story, the pitch, the enthusiasm that you can find inside yourself. And that can take time. That can take 3, 4, 5, 6 months to kind of figure out and road test and kind of act as if in your life. If you're in a job and you're trying to figure out what are you going to do, you're either looking at the end of the road. A friend of mine calls this the working worried. You're kind of in your 50s and you're thinking, oh, maybe they're going to fire me tomorrow. You're kind of feeling this ominous pall starting to descend on your job. Then you're actually in a perfect situation while you're still making money to start thinking about what it is that you want to do beyond this.
Yep.
Because if you're in your 50s, don't think that you have job security. You don't. Don't think that what you need to do is just get another job like the one you've got, because then you're just going to be back in the same situation that you're already in. And you're going to buy yourself a few more years, maybe, but then we'll be having this conversation again in 3 years or 5 years when you're 58 or 60 and the situation seems more dire and you still haven't saved enough money for retirement. So you got to think about this now. You got to think about, what is it that I could be doing, or what are a number of things that I could be doing between now and the next 20 years that are going to keep me going, that are going to be sustainable, where it's really me in control of providing this business, service, whatever it is. How do I start doing that? So the beauty of living in the electronic digital age is that you can start a business from your smartphone. So I would recommend that you start doing that. And I talk about some of the stages in the book. There are plenty of resources available for you to look at starting businesses, to learn what you need to learn through YouTube videos.
Right.
It's an amazing resource out there.
Right.
I mean, we live in an absolutely unprecedented time where everything is available to us. So one of those reframes that we were talking about before, is over the question of, oh, well, I don't know how to do that, or I couldn't do that, or I couldn't start a business, or I'm not an entrepreneur. Entrepreneurs are born, they're not made. Well, I don't know about that. I think that, yeah, the famous entrepreneurs are born, but the rest of us are just business owners. And if you don't see yourself as a business owner in your current job, where you are acting like a consultant delivering value to a client versus an employee taking directions from a boss, you've got some reframing to do, because your ability to sustain yourself in your current job and maybe grow out of that job into something that is more yours has to do with deciding what that value is that you provide. What is that entrepreneurial mindset that you bring to the table?
How can you solve other people's pain points? That is always the first question. I took a job about a year ago in this Post facility in Burbank, and I'm the creative marketing director and branded content producer. But to your point, number one, it's after 22 years of being an entrepreneur, it is not bringing me the fulfillment that I thought a 9-to-5 job might bring me. Yes, I have the security of a paycheck, which I never had before, but I'm not fulfilled every day. Now, I am doing exactly what you said. Use that time that you're being paid to create and have an architecture for your encore performance, for your second act. And that's exactly, I now go to work very content because I can go to work knowing that this is something that is given to me and given to me in a way so I can go to the next step in my life. I have to have that attitude, and I'm grateful every day for a job that really doesn't fulfill me, but yet it pays me. And to that point, I'm going to take a quick break in a minute, but when we come back, I do want to talk about resumes versus how we shouldn't, I have not a resume, John. I do not have one. And how networking and LinkedIn and the new way of finding and connecting is prevalent today. So we'll be right back. You're listening to Generation Jones, 1954 to 1964. Conversations with remarkable people who shaped our world. Make sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. I've been talking to John Tarnoff. He's the author of the book, The Boomer Reinvention, How to Create Your Dream Career Over 50, and a career coach for people over 50. So, John, we were just talking about how important it is to reframe oneself, but let's talk a little bit about resumes and LinkedIn and why the resume isn't really the key to getting your next place in life.
Right. Well, resumes are important. They are important as a record of your past accomplishments, and they are a tool that a recruiter or a hiring manager will use to spread you around the company when they're bringing you in for interviews so that everyone knows who you are. But the resume is no longer a tool to get a job. And this is why so many people say to me, I sent 50 resumes out and I never heard back. Everyone is appalled by the fact that no one responds to a resume submission and a cover letter anymore. And they're irate at this. But in a world where something like 300,000 resumes a day are going up on Indeed and Monster, recruiters are overwhelmed. And they are going to be putting your resume through a scanner to scan for keywords to see if you fit the algorithm of what they think that particular job requirement is and whether you fit it, which is a terrible robotic way of pursuing your career, particularly at an age where you know more than that, right? So back away from the resume. The truth is that only about 15% of jobs are filled through direct resume submissions. 85% of jobs are filled through referrals. So you want to be the person who is referred into that job. And you do that, obviously, by creating a network. And you do that, obviously, by being on LinkedIn. It's like, what would we do if we didn't have LinkedIn? We would have to They'd have to create it.
Well,
They did.
you need to be present, right? You need to let people know you exist. It's like you can't sit in your house, send out resumes, because that's not going to work. You have to be on LinkedIn, and we're going to talk. You give great
That's
advice
right.
about being on LinkedIn, but you also have
Right.
to be on LinkedIn in a certain way. Right, you have
Right.
to, and you have to work it. It's not just gonna go put your stuff up on LinkedIn and everybody's gonna come flocking to you. That isn't gonna happen
Right.
either.
Right. If you build it, they will come. Only worked in that one movie.
I love it.
In real life, my ex-boss, Jeffrey Katzenberg, had a great line about this. We were at some school, and some kid said, as an artist, I want my work to speak for me. And Katzenberg says, well, in a perfect world, your art, your work should speak for you. He said, but in the real world, you have to speak for your work.
Uh-huh. That's great.
And that really is the truth of it. So LinkedIn is the first place where anyone is going to look you up. If you meet someone at a networking event, or on the street, or wherever, they're going to look you up on LinkedIn, because every recruiter is on there. Anyone who's trying to fill a position is on there. The platform is dedicated to
professionals,
but to career, right? It's all about career advancement. That's what that platform is about. They have a special subscription for recruiters, right? Where they give special tools for recruiters. They bought lynda.com so they could have a huge library of training materials so that people could advance their careers and get better. So you got to be on LinkedIn. I'm shocked at how some people are not on LinkedIn. And invariably, I'll go out to speak, and there's one person in the audience who doesn't have a LinkedIn profile, doesn't have a Facebook profile, and who has just somehow maintained this distance from social media. You gotta participate. You gotta jump in the pool. And again, as you were alluding to before, LinkedIn is not your resume. It is, you gotta approach this as a way of sharing your full personness through the platform. There is a section in LinkedIn called Experience. That's where you put all your resume stuff.
Right.
But there is a headline, which is 120 characters, and then there is a summary, which is 2,000 characters. And those two pieces of LinkedIn are critical. And I spend a lot of time with clients constantly refining, defining how they are presenting themselves in their headline and their summary.
And that's so important, because that maps back to search, and you give those tips in your book. The first thing I did was, it gets a little overwhelming, John, always keeping things updated and things like that. And you kind of have to put things in priority. I know that I do so many things, and I think probably people of our age do have multiple wisdoms, but I do still do so many things. And it might be confusing to people, because on my LinkedIn it says my C-Spot Run production company is still alive and well, which it is. You want to hire me, I can do that. That I work full-time for Lumini Productions. Okay, yes, I do that. And then also that I'm a podcaster, and that I have Generation Jones podcast, which is something separate. You say that, now this might be a good example for you to give advice. You say that in the paragraph, the description paragraph that comes,
the summary section,
that you should make that really like a mission statement. That your personal mission statement, yours is wonderfully written. I went on the other day to try to write mine, but then I thought, it gets a little confusing, because I'm a podcaster, I'm a producer, I'm a creative person. And so you do give the tools, I believe, in the book, once again, because I love your book, to figure out how to make that summary mission statement.
Right. I've done some more work since the book about this, and working with people. And there are two things to talk about. One of them is Postits, and Postits are a phenomenal tool to use in trying to figure out how you're going to describe yourself and use keywords, right? Because this is, as you say, this is really all about search, and you want people to be finding you through the keywords that you use in your headline and in your summary. And if you look at a smattering of, or a random sample of LinkedIn profiles, people will go all over the map. Some people will be cute in their headlines to try to catch people's attention. The problem is, by being cute and witty in your headline, you're just kind of being cute and witty for yourself, because no one is searching on any of those terms, those cute and witty terms that you're using. So you want to be careful to talk about yourself in terms of the role that you do, but also in terms of the solution that you provide. So rather than saying VP marketing, you would probably better say, marketing. Let's say you're focused on, I don't know, consumer goods. So it's consumer marketing specialist, experienced consumer marketing specialist. That is a headline as opposed to the job title that you have had. Now, similarly, in the summary, what I'm kind of coming to is this idea that the summary is a way of stating, along the lines of this idea of a mission statement of what drives you, what inspires you, and what you are looking to achieve going forward. Because you have to identify or bond with people about the aspirational nature of your work. Where do you want to go? What's the transformation that you want to achieve for clients, whether it's an internal client, aka a boss, or it is an actual paying consulting client out there. So you want to kind of catch people's attention through a summary that reveals a little bit more about what your motivation is and what your mission is, as you say, rather than restating in narrative form what's already on your resume.
Yes.
They're going to see that. If they're interested in the headline and the summary, they're going to read down into the experience section and see where you've worked and what you've done. And you've got to be really clear in that experience section about putting the ROI. And I've gotten into trouble with people who come to coach with me with, so what do you mean? I did this, it should be clear. It's like, no, it's not clear. It's not clear that you are responsible for a team of 25 people and generated 10x revenue, year over year for 10 years. That doesn't come by saying senior VP of whatever, right? You've got to be specific, and you've got to be impressive as you can be.
It was interesting. My one of my sons, he's 37, and he was in a job search, let's just say, and his written resume was like, he sent it to me and I just went, oh my God, it's all over the place, So he did hire a professional resume writer in his category of work, and wow, it was beautiful. And it made him look completely like, the first one was like, oh, it's this guy, he's pontificating about himself and he's really just all over the place, it's like kind of, but she translated it into this beautifully written, very focused on his accomplishments in sales and things like this, what he brought to each company. And this guy, he's just getting calls all of the time to meet with companies.
Right. And I'm sure it's on his LinkedIn profile as well.
Yes. And she put it there too.
Right? Yeah. At the end of the day, it's a narrative. You're telling a story. There's a beginning and a middle and end. The beginning is, I started here with a goal of doing this. The middle is, and here's what I did to pursue that goal. And the end is, and now going forward, I'm going to use everything that I've learned over all of these jobs, A, B, C, and D that I just talked about, to go here, D, E, F, and G. And
from just a little tidbit of advice, it's your personal brand, really, and your photograph, you say, should be a professional photograph. It shouldn't be just like, excuse me.
Well, it should be a well lit,
yes,
clear, positive headshot.
Yes.
I think it, the overly lit, kind of false corporate headshot is, I think, a thing of the past. I think we all have great cameras, professional cameras on our phones. So better to go outside and go up against a nice wall and on a well lit day and have someone take a nice snapshot of you.
Because
it feels more natural.
The photograph itself is so important, because you some people leave their photograph off of their LinkedIn page, which is so bizarre, I think.
And you should also fill in that background. A lot of people don't have the background filled in. I think the background is a great opportunity to show, maybe it's where you live, maybe it's a place, maybe it's a business, maybe it's some inspirational photo. But anything that you can do, again, to further that brand, that sense of what you stand for, who you are, what's meaningful to you, those are all important cues.
Because you want to always, if you get someone to get to your page and to read your summary, more than likely they're going to scroll down, like you said, to read the resume. It's kind of like the eye works from the left down, right? Left to right and down. Yep. And that's what you always have to think about. What's at the top of your page? How's it moving down? Your photograph is at the top left of that page. They're going to see your photo first, so then they're going to see your headline, and then maybe they're going to read your summary. And if they've read your summary and have spent that much time, which is maybe a minute or two on your LinkedIn page, they more than likely will go further.
Yep.
There's so many things that we could talk about, but I've taken up almost an hour of your time already, John. And I wanted to make sure to let everybody know if you could talk a little bit about where to find the book. It is an audiobook too, and John does read it, and I love that about it, and I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Thank you. So the book is Boomer Reinvention, How to Create Your Dream Career Over 50. It's available on Amazon, wherever toys are sold. And it's in paperback, Kindle, and audiobook. And my website is, no surprise, johntarnoff.com, JOHNT as in Tom, ARNOFF as in Frank.com. And I'm on Twitter, John Tarnoff, and Facebook as Boomer Reinvention.
And I might say that there are, if you want to visit YouTube, your TED Talk is on YouTube.
Yes, absolutely. Just search for me on YouTube, and the talk is there. And the talk really lays out the basics of the 5 steps. And if that resonates with you, then I would suggest you pick up a copy of the book and see how it works for you.
Yeah, I highly recommend it. I just highly recommend it. That's all I can say. And I typically don't recommend a whole lot of things, but it really resonated with me. It really made me focus. And I'll call you next week to let you know if I'm on day 12 of my journal. But I so appreciate you being here for what you're doing, and I hope to see you again one day, and maybe have lunch or something. So
that'd be great, Wendi. Let's stay in touch, and I love doing this. I love helping people figure out their next act. It's such an important step for all of us to take, and to realize that we're not done yet. We've got another couple of decades to kick ass and take names. And
that's right. And you know what? I'm just getting started. So that's really how I feel. So
there's your reframe right there. You're just getting started on your next act.
That's right. So thank you, John Tarnoff, for being here. I'd like to thank Tom at Orsi Digital Media for his support of the show and his wonderful sound design. I'd also like to thank Skylar Billish for his original score that I adore. Make sure to subscribe everywhere you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening.